tell you why. When I was a little girl, about 5 years old, this church had a Christmas pageant one year, and I had a line I had to say on a microphone. And when they handed me the microphone, I started to say it, and then I'm like, I forgot the rest, and everybody laughed. So ever since then, I swore I would never talk into a microphone ever again, but here I am. So also, I was thinking, when Bruce asked me to do this, I'm like, terrified of speaking in front of people, but I'm like, why would I be afraid to speak in front of people? I'm like, I went to Ukraine during a war and grabbed a child out and brought her home. I'm like, so I got to thinking, I'm like, in comparison, this is no big deal. So give me grace. I really don't like to speak in front of people. So, as Bruce said, I'm a mom, I'm a respiratory therapist, and I'm a wife, pastor's wife. So we have a very busy life. So back in January 2021, we were getting ready for church one morning, and I went into the bathroom. Phil was getting a shower, and I said, Phil, we should adopt again. And while I said that, I'm like, he's going to say no big deal. But God had been working on my heart for a couple weeks, and I didn't know really what to think of it at that point. But he's like, what did you say? I said, we should adopt again. And he kind of looked at me and, are you sure? He didn't say no. So from that point, he always said that, when God speaks, we're going to move forward. And that he believed that God was speaking for me that time. And I said, but if we adopt, I do not want to go into debt. I'm like, that's the biggest thing about doing this adoption, because when we adopted Eliana, we borrowed money against my retirement so we could do the upfront cost, and we had just gotten it paid off I think less than a year before this. So I'm like, I really don't want to go into debt. And so that's where we started. So when we started talking to our friends and family, nobody said that we were overtly crazy, except for maybe my mom. But nobody said, oh, you shouldn't do this. And we prayed about it, and we started walking in this path that God had for us. And it became very clear very quickly that this is what God wanted. We put out a fundraiser, like a crowdfunding fundraiser for upfront cost, which were around $10,000. And within a week or so, we had $10,000, and we were able to pay those first costs with the agency cost and the homesteading cost. And then we knew for sure that we were on the path. I'm like, God would not allow this to happen if this isn't the way we were supposed to go. So we started going through all the paperwork and the fingerprints. And God bless my husband. I will give him the credit for this. I said I grew our biological children, which we have 3. I was like, paper is your pregnancy. And he did all the paperwork for Eliana's adoption, which is our daughter from Armenia. And so he took on the paperwork baby this time again. And so many months. At first they told us, from start to finish for a Ukrainian adoption in 6 to 9 months. I was really excited. I'm like, this is going to be really fast. We're going to have her probably by the end of the year. Well, we ran into some problems, some obstacles. That's usually what happens. And we did not get to meet her until December 2021. So that was when we were hoping to actually bring her home. So we went to Ukraine in 2021, or in December, and it was a whirlwind trip. So we got word that we could go, but we were only going to be there for 5 days because the facilitator was getting kids together to bring them to America to be hosted. So we got there, did traveling. It was just a lot of stuff. I felt like my head was spinning. It was so fast. We got to spend 3 days visiting Brizzy, and so probably about a total of 6 hours we got to meet her. And then we had to decide, oh, this is the kid. We had no doubt. We already decided before we went. But to back up a little bit, Brizzy, when we decided to pick, when we decided that Brizzy was a child for us, we found out quickly that she wasn't an ordinary orphan. We found out that she was actually biologically American. So her parents hired a surrogate in Ukraine to have her, and the pregnancy was actually 3 babies. They aborted a baby because I guess 3 was too many, and the surrogate went into labor at 25 weeks. And Brizzy was born, and her brother was born. Her brother passed away at 6 days. But Brizzy, she was hanging in there. Her American parents decided that they were not going to move forward with bringing her home because the doctor told them that she was going to be profoundly disabled. So at that point, her parents decided that, they didn't want life-saving measures, just to let her pass away peacefully. Well, as you can tell, she did not pass away, and she actually thrived. She was in the NICU for around 30 days, and she was in some kind of rehabilitation hospital for 3 years of her first 3 years of her life, where she met a nurse who took a liking to her and really just poured her heart and soul into her. Her name is Marina. We'll talk more about Marina later. But Marina, I really believe that the love that Marina provided Brizzy is why Brizzy is as strong and healthy as she is today. And she really had that mom figure early on in her life that I think gave her a reason to fight and a reason to live. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of backstory for how her story started. So her being this abandoned surrogate baby also opened her up to a lot of publicity throughout the country, actually the world. There's people in Germany that took a liking to a story that Australian broadcasting company did about surrogacy and problems with it, and she was their headline story. So she was well known around the world. I mean, not necessarily U.S. We didn't know, but in Eastern Europe, she was well known for her story. So when Phil and I decided on her, we found out her story, and it was just really devastating to us that this had happened to her and all the things that she's been through. So it gave us more fervor to, this is our child for sure. She belongs here, and we're going to make sure she gets here. So after our trip in December, we were expecting to go back in January to get her. Our judge got COVID, so that pushed off our trip. And then we also found out she had citizenship issues because of her having American parents. They had signed their rights away, but when Ukraine took citizenship over her, they didn't finish paperwork. So she was kind of in limbo. She wasn't fully Ukrainian. She wasn't American. So the paperwork she needed to get her passport was not available. So we were waiting and waiting and waiting. So we found out sometime in February that her paperwork should be finished February 25th. Well, I don't know if you follow the news, but February 24th is when Russia declared war on Ukraine, and everything shut down. The embassy, the American embassy was closed. All the paperwork, everything that would do paperwork so she could be ours, just shut down. And we were on indefinite hold, and we're like, now what, we had these fears that Russia, if they take over, they don't allow Americans to adopt. So we didn't know where we stood or how this was going to be. So thankfully for us, we had Marina. Marina still visits her once or twice a week. She gave us lots of updates and, kept our hearts at peace. She said there's really not much going on here in this region right now. We got to get lots of videos and pictures of her. And then we had a a journalist from Der Spiegel, which is a German magazine. He was vested in our story. He did a story on us about her before we got her and also after we got her. So he was working on a story about, her story now that she's stuck in Ukraine and we're stuck in America and not being able to get her. And so he set up a video chat with Marina, so we actually got to video chat with her. It was 6 o'clock in the morning for us, I believe, because it's like they have like 6-hour time difference. So we were all up early, and there's a picture we could show it later if you want. But we were sitting on the couch as a family, talking to Marina and Rizzy on FaceTime, basically. And so we got that opportunity. And then somewhere in February, I don't remember exactly the day, but we found out that they evacuated Rizzy out of her region. Her region is Zaporizhzhia. If you've listened to the news, that's where that power plant is that Russia's taken over. So they had evacuated them, and we lost all contact. We had no idea where she was, how she was doing, if she got there safely. Marina had no idea. They had left in the night, didn't even tell Marina, and they actually told Marina she could go with them, and then they didn't let her go or tell her anything. They just disappeared one night with the kids. So at that point, we were just devastated. It was worse. I'm like, at least when she was in the region, yeah, we knew war was a big possibility, and she could be injured that way, but we had connection. We knew where she was. We knew she was safe. We knew that Marina could give us updates. So it was a really, really tough time at that point. And then my oldest daughter, turned 18 this year, and she graduated. And my mom and myself and her went to California for just like a senior trip, just to enjoy Kara. We had a great time. And while I was in California, Phil called me. He's like, Marina said we could go to court. Do you want to go? I'm like, what are you talking about? We've heard nothing about anything. And now we can go to the court in the middle of a war? And I'm like, yeah, we're going to go. So I'm like, is this real? So he contacted our facilitator and our in-country facilitator. And like, is this true? Can we really go to Ukraine and get her? Because as far as we knew, nothing was happening with adoptions. So lo and behold, Marina had gone and visited the judge multiple times, and he finally said, they can come. If they can come, they can come get her and take her home. And we're like, okay, we'll do it. So while I was in California, this was brought on, and then we had a week, not even a week, 5 days, and then we left for Ukraine. So I had to coordinate care for Eliana and make sure all the kids could get back and forth to school, and we had 4 at the time, so my oldest was still in high school, but she had a pretty flexible schedule, so she was able to help us. And then the boys are fairly, sufficient. So it was mainly Eliana, our 8-year-old, that needed the care. And we haven't met Eliana. Eliana is a lot of care. She is a very special girl. We love her. She's got a lot of energy, but she has a lot of needs too. When you're a paraplegic, you have way more needs than you ever know. So just my parents agreed to help us. Really good friend Andy and Tanya, friends, right? They're back there, help us. Mainly getting her on the bus and off the bus and cared for in the evening. Tanya and Andy were able to come help us get her on the bus. So I just want to stop for a second and just say that community, having your church community, is the best community you can have. When you know you have people you can count on, it really puts your heart at ease knowing that you're leaving your 4 children behind, and of course your family and community as well. We didn't tell a lot of people because, our security was a concern, so we didn't want to put anything out there on Facebook, but like people we could tell by mouth, we said, please pray for us. We're going to Ukraine. It's going to be hard to leave our children behind, other children behind, but our child is in Ukraine and she needs to be rescued. And I know it was hard on my mom, because, as a mom, you don't want to see your kid go get killed in another country trying to save their kid. And my parents, I know they were on edge, and I know our friends were on edge, but not one time did I ever feel like we shouldn't go. And I'm pretty good with, intuitions, and I really don't feel like it's an intuition. I really feel like it's the Holy Spirit talking to you and trying to guide you in areas. And I really never one time felt like, anything was going to happen to us. So we loaded up, got on a plane, and flew to Poland, Warsaw, Poland. And that journalist that we mentioned earlier, he met us there. He picked us up, got us to our hotel for the night. And then, the big stuff started. I think it was the next day. We got in a car, and he had a Russian passport, so he could not take us to Ukraine. He was actually lived before he did an article about us, lived in Russia, and he knew he couldn't go back because what he wrote about them, he would have been targeted. So he knew he couldn't go back. So he dropped us off at the border, and that's when the fun started. How many people get to hitchhike across the border into a country that's at war with another country? So it took us about an hour to find someone willing to take us over. At first we found a truck driver who would take us over, but they were in this big line, and he had a whole load of flak jackets, and he was going to be like a long time getting inspected and getting across. So the journalist, his name is Timothy, he, when it got a little later, they had some police officers, Polish police officers at the border that actually ended up helping us get in with the Red Cross truck. So we got in this Red Cross van, and the guy spoke only Polish, and we spoke only English, and we had no internet, so we couldn't use Google Translate. So we're trying to tell him where we needed to go and all this stuff. And finally, he gets on the phone. He had a friend that spoke English. So we got to tell them, we just got to get across the border. Somebody will be waiting for us. So we went through all the inspections and made it across. And then we met our facilitator from Ukraine. He couldn't come across to get us because he was of fighting age and he couldn't leave the country. So we had that. And it was like a walkable distance, but they would not let anybody walk. We had to actually have a ride. So once we got over there, we met Alex, as we call him Alex, and he started our journey to Kyiv. So we were kind of in western Ukraine, and then we had to drive to Kyiv. So it was very interesting seeing, at first everything kind of looked normal, but the closer you got to Kyiv, you started seeing more checkpoints, and there was checkpoints all the way, and they had way you had to go through things. You had to go around, so you just couldn't speed through a checkpoint. So they slowed you down, made sure you weren't, the bad guys trying to get in. And we got to Kyiv. Got there, we got some food. We went up to our facilitator's apartment just to rest for a little while. And then it was time to, catch our train to go to Zapsorižžia, because, the whole trip was trains, planes, automobiles, and boats, everything we went on during that trip. So I had bought some groceries to take on the train with us, and Phil and I had come down from the apartment, and I'm like, oh, I forgot the groceries, so I went back up the elevator and got them. So we got the stuff, and I came back down, and Phil's like, someone just came over on the street and said there was a missile strike like 3 blocks away. I'm like, what? I was a little nervous about that. I'm like, oh, really? So I did not feel the shaking or anything, but he said that it sounded like, the elevator was just like being a little clinky, so he didn't really think anything of it until, someone went by. So when we went outside, you could actually see the smoke. But we had to get in the car and head to the train station. So we had a photographer that was kind of following us too, and he decided to go just on site where the missiles had hit. And it ended up being a residential building, and it was the same day that the UN ambassador was in Ukraine, and the next day Nancy Pelosi was in there. But someone did end up losing their life. It was a reporter who lost her life in that missile strike. So we ended up going to the train station, and we took an overnight train to Zapsorižžia. So like I mentioned earlier, at the time, Zapsorižžia wasn't really a hot spot. It's a little more hot spot now, but and I attribute God's timing to that as well. So we took an overnight train, and it was clanky, and it was not terribly uncomfortable, but it was okay. I was able to sleep. Phil didn't sleep. We stopped at one point, and he mentioned he was worried because it was like, are we getting stopped because of a missile, or what's going on? Then he realized it was just stopping to let people off and on. So once we got started again, we were good. And so we made it to Zapsorižžia the next day. And then we went to court. So that day we went to court. Before court, we got a hotel room, not to sleep in, but just to shower and freshen up. And actually rested for about an hour. And then we got picked up to go to court from another facilitator. And no, actually, it was still Alex at that point. So we get to court, air raid sirens are going off, and we were asked if we wanted to go to the bomb shelter, and we're like, nobody else seems to care. No, we're okay. Nobody cared. Like, it was just something that happened all day long, apparently. So we're like, no, we'll just wait here, because we're like, we don't want anything to, like, make court longer or take longer. So we found out one of the jurors was not going to come, I guess, because of the airstrike. So they had to find someone else to stand in for that person. So it took a little while. We waited and waited, and then we had court. So the judge who was asking us all these questions, can you afford to have another kid? Why do you want to come here? He was like, I forget one of the questions, but he was like, why did you come here to get her? I'm like, well, when your kid is in another country and stranded, you'll do anything to go get that kid. That's what I answered. I'm like, she's my daughter. I came here because we need to get her home. She's my child. She needs to go home. And so he left, and he came back to issue the decree. And of course, they said that we could take her home. And the judge was like, you're very brave for coming. Of course, he spoke Ukrainian, and we were translated to that. I'm like, well, you didn't really give us a choice. We had to go. Which is funny, because during COVID, they were doing virtual court. But during the war, it's in person. So, I mean, COVID's deadlier than Russians, apparently. Anyway, we got the decree, and then we had to take another night train. So we met Marina, who I mentioned earlier, the nurse that loves Brizzy very much. And she actually wanted to adopt Brizzy, but was unable to. So if that puts another heart wrench into your heart, she loved her enough that she wanted to be her mom. But she was told that I think she didn't make enough money, or whatever the reason, they said that she could not adopt her. So we picked her up, and she was going to hang out with us in Warsaw until we were getting ready to leave. So we picked her up, did the night train back to Kyiv, and then we took a car from Kyiv to Lviv, and that's where Brizzy was evacuated to. So they had like this makeshift orphanage where she and her other orphan mates were. And we were able to go in, and we were her parents now. So we signed all the paperwork there, picked her up. We spent the night in Lviv, and the next morning we caught a bus to Warsaw. It's a 5-hour trip if you take a car. It's a 9-hour trip if you take a bus. It was the most miserable 9 hours of my life, and I don't ever hope to do that ever again. But Brizzy did amazing. It was Marina, Brizzy, me, Phil, and some random guy next to Phil in the back of the bus. And the guy sitting next to Phil was like this the whole time. He was like, "Don't look at me, don't touch me." And we had to, when we crossed the border, we had to get off the bus in Ukraine. They had to do their inspection. We had to take all of our luggage off. We had to go in and show all of our papers. Or actually, they took all of our passports. And then we got back on the bus. And then when we went to the next border, we all had to get off the bus. They took our passports. We had to go in. We had to get our luggage scanned just like you would at the airport. They had like this big humanitarian tents, like Poland. I'm telling you, you could see God's love in Poland. They had people handing out free food and candy and toys and just comfort items for the refugees, of Ukraine. I mean, we weren't refugees, but they still, handed out stuff and was very supportive. So once we got through that, we got back on the bus and we made a few stops on the way. But like I said, it was the most miserable situation. Like the steps going down the bus were like this wide, and I'm trying to carry Brizzy because Brizzy can't walk, and I'm trying to carry the bag, so I'm like passing her down to somebody, and it's just like you had to hold on to the rail just to get down the steps so you didn't fall yourself. So doing that a couple times, it was very exhausting. But once we got across the border to Poland, I said, Phil, you can put it on Facebook. We are safe out of Ukraine. She's our daughter. You can announce it to Facebook. So then we got to tell everybody what we've been up to for that week and announce our new daughter. So while we were in Warsaw, we had a whole lot of paperwork to do. So we had to get an appointment for her health, and we had to go to the embassy to get her paperwork. So it took 12 days to get everything done. And really what took the longest was the health thing. She had to have a blood test for TB, and it took 7 days for the results to come back. And that was what was holding us up, 7 days for these blood results. And once we got that, we were able to hop on a plane and head home and acclimate into our new crazy life with 2 special needs children and 3 typical children who are busy. And there's a ton of more details in there, and my husband's the storyteller, but I think you probably get the gist of what we went through. But after we got back, I reflected on a lot of things, and one of the things that really hit me was all the prayer. There were so many people praying for us, so many churches, so many just people we knew praying for us, and I really feel that's why I had peace. I knew that God was with us. I knew He would call us somewhere and then take us out, and if He did, He had a plan in it. But that gave me peace. I'm like, we're not going to this war-torn country to pick up a child just so we can die and leave our other children behind. But in the moment, it's hard to tell your mom, your friends, God's got this, we're going to be okay. We're going to come back. We're going to parent these children again. Because, you always have to prepare your heart for the worst. But I know these ladies right here, who's part of my prayer group, they prayed us through this. Our church people prayed us through this. Many of your churches probably prayed us through this and we didn't even know. We had people in Washington State praying us through, churches in Ohio. I mean, there was a lot of people we knew personally that specifically they're like, we need fervent prayer for our friends. They're in the process of adoption. And even the day that the missile hit Kyiv, I still had a peace. I'm like, I know we're doing your work, God. You never left us one time. We had some frustrating times during the way, but it never felt like this wasn't what we were supposed to do. And I just want to encourage you guys, whatever God's calling you to do, He's going to equip you. He's going to give you the tools. He's going to give you what you need, whether it's financially, whether it's the courage. Just be faithful. God's got you. He had us. And now I'm happy to report we're home, we're settling in. Things aren't easy, but He still has us. He's still helping us every day deal with, the challenges of having 2 children that were abandoned and have trauma from that abandonment and have health issues that are hard to work through. But He also gave us a beautiful community of believers that would drop anything to help us, and I'm very thankful for that as well. So if you don't have relationships in your church, I definitely think you need to reach out. Find that core group of people that you connect with. They have your back, You have their back, they have your back. And I'm telling you, if it wasn't for that, this 5-day notice that I'm going to Ukraine, what the heck are we going to do? If, Andy and Tanyette and other friends didn't step up, and my parents didn't step up and say, it'll work. Don't worry, we'll get this taken